Welcome back, Equity Warriors. Thanks for tuning in. I know for many of you in North America, it's the middle of the workday, but not to worry. If you ever miss a live stream, you will still get the edited podcast via your regular audio podcast platform, as well as right here on my YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel at Almitra Berry, do it now. Just click on the subscribe button and then hit that notifications button. That way, you'll be the first to get every show right here, where you can watch the sausage get made. You don't want to miss it. My guest today is Leslie Kelly. She's been an educator for more than 20 years, and yet she continues to find ways to support all students using an equity lens. She began her career at age 18 as a paraeducator, and she continues to promote the importance of education. Much of her time was spent working with justice-impacted students, those who were on probation, in Fresno County's court and community schools. After graduating from Fresno State in 2015, she was hired as a restorative practice school counselor with Fresno Unified School District, where her work helped to reduce suspension rates in African American students by 10%. She is currently a program coordinator with the Office of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, overseeing the Teachers of Color Alliance for Educational Empowerment, a grow your own teaching pipeline aimed at increasing the number of African American teachers in Fresno County. This current role has allowed Leslie to stretch and grow beyond what she thought was possible, having the children of Fresno County grow up and having at least 4 African American teachers. And I know for a fact, I never had 4 in my K-12 career, so we have to talk about that. She understands that representation matters, and because of this, her passion is to simply be what she was blessed to have. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Dr. Berry.
I am excited that you're here. So I'm going to tell our little secret. We met at an equity conference in San Diego, and it was one of those sessions I thought was just going to be phenomenal. And so I got there early because stuff was crazy packed. So I got there early and I went down to the very front row and sat right there at the front corner seat, my favorite spot. And about 10 minutes into it, I realized it was not what it was advertised to be. And after being miserable for a period of time, but not wanting to be rude, I finally said, forget it. There are other things I could be listening to. And so I tipped out. And on my way out, I whispered something into Leslie's ear, and I don't even remember what it was. But I guess you left shortly thereafter. Yeah.
Yes.
And then we met in another session that was phenomenal. And we started talking. We just connected and gelled. And so I said, I have to have you on my podcast.
Oh, my God. Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes. That session was very interesting. And it actually felt good to have somebody feel the same way I felt in that session, because that usually doesn't happen. We sit in sessions, we go to conferences, and you kind of just weather it out. But I think we actually made eye contact too, because it was just a lot of things being said that was concerning. And so anyway, you left, and probably about 5-10 seconds after you left, I left.
All right. So I want to talk about justice impacted students and your role with them. I had a guest on actually several shows ago now who works with justice impacted students in Southern California. So what was your experience like, and how did that shape your approach to education?
I love the experience because what I learned personally through experience was the level of jewels that we have in a system that are not looked at as jewels. And these students are phenomenal. I also started seeing cousins and neighbors and friends of the very students. So sitting there being young, mind you, I've been in education since I was 18 years old as a paraeducator. I didn't realize what I was seeing was called recidivism. Like you learn all this stuff later. I knew though that I had a chance to, and an opportunity to be something to a student that possibly maybe they didn't have. But when you look at it from a systems lens, I begin to say, okay, wait a minute, is it the student or is it a system? So it really began to make me question education, if I can be honest. Not so much to leave though, because I mean, being in this space, we question education, or at least I have, but not enough to leave. It really made me want to fight differently. So I love what I learned there. I'm saddened by what I saw there, but I think it helped shape this direction that I begin to grow and go, later in my educational years.
I wonder if you, like me, when I think back to my early years in teaching, and seeing what I now recognize to be inequities, and a lack of inclusiveness, if you kind of saw the same thing, there was something wrong, you didn't have a name for it, you just knew it
Right.
wasn't right.
Absolutely. And I can tell you half of the things I saw I didn't have a name for. You just know like something's not sitting right or something's not making sense or why is it all these black and brown boys? Like you know what you see.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I had the validation to know, as a paraeducator, and we can also talk about hierarchy in education, right? So as a paraeducator, when you're asking these questions, um, there's a level of sometimes getting your hand slapped or, uh, but it didn't stop me from asking the questions. But I also credit my court and community school students for even where I am today, because it was those students who said, you know what, Miss Kelly, you're not just a teacher. You really are a counselor. Have you thought about counseling? Like it was I mean, the insight that they have, the um, the knowledge that they have. But what I also learned is we also as adults have to fight harder for those students.
Yeah. Our kids know and recognize a lot more than we want to give them credit for a lot of times, right? They have, I mean, we've all got a gut, I think, as we get older.
Right.
We don't listen to it as well, maybe because we have, I guess, we've shaped what we think is supposed to be right and wrong. And so we're a little less attached to that gut feeling. But kids, I think, operate a lot more on instinct, and
Mhm.
they know when someone cares about them. They know when someone wants to teach them, when someone believes in them, and when they don't.
100% agree. It's just really interesting that I look back on that experience as some of the best years of my life in education versus some of the work I ended up doing later. Great work, all great work, but if I can really talk about what when I was my better self, and I agree with you, it's that I don't want to lose that gut instinct. I didn't even, like you said, I couldn't put a name to it that, okay, why am I seeing cousins? Like I couldn't put a name to a school to prison pipeline. I couldn't put a name to some of the things that, like I said, later on in education, we now use the terminology. But I can promise you, I had that gut instinct. And as you said, students have it. Students were very verbal in saying, oh, that person doesn't care about me. Right? And I don't know if we're listening.
I don't think we are. If we were, I probably wouldn't have this show.
Right.
But but here
Right.
we are. So your bio says that when you were a counselor, a restorative practice counselor in Fresno Unified, that you helped to reduce suspension rates in African American students by 10%. So if you have numbers, then I might be putting you on a spot for demographic numbers I didn't warn you about. But let's talk about the disproportionality in suspensions and expulsions of our Black and Brown children. What does it look like where you are?
So our demographics, we're higher Latinx, Hispanic students. That would probably run about high 68%, if not a little bit more now. Our African American students, particularly at the school that I served, I can tell you the school that I served only had 7% African American, and the suspension rate before I got there, or the year before, I can tell you was at 46% African American. You want to talk about disproportionality?
Wow. That's
So,
like seven times
mhm,
their representation.
yes. So I didn't, and it's so funny because I didn't realize that I left a very punitive system in court and community schools, and then here I am doing restorative justice, right? And you know what restorative justice was. So here I go from one end of the pendulum to the other. And none of this work was done overnight. I will tell you that. It's not like I went in going, hey, I'm doing restorative justice now. We're going to do this. What I actually learned about restorative was its roots in racial healing. And once I really started doing my own in-depth study of what true restorative was, because I will tell you, even though I was taught to do restorative, was punitive. and it still targeted students. It wasn't until I connected with some friends in Oakland Unified School District and would sit on Zooms with them, of course, where I'm mind blown because I wasn't even taught it from this lens when I got hired. And I don't know if they didn't know, but this was my own in-depth study of it. And not once was it mentioned to me that, oh no, this was done in Indigenous people or racial healing. And this is how we bring communities together to solve issues. So I began really to go on my own journey when it comes to restorative. So I'm a huge fan of restorative justice when it's done right. I can also
So
tell you.
tell us what it means for it to be done right, because I'm sort of wondering now. You hear it all the time: restorative justice, restorative practice, restorative healing, whatever. Everybody's calling it something,
Right,
and I know we're fond of attaching labels to
right.
things. What should it look like when done right?
It should look like healing. It should look like communities coming together, by the way, voluntarily, not involuntarily, not like, oh, you're going to go sit in that circle with Miss Kelly, right? That's not it. It should look like conversational. By the way, we're communal people. We talk. I learn more by listening and talking to you than I ever probably would, and I'm not against textbooks, but I'm just saying that's just how we communicate with each other. We gain knowledge off each other. So if you're looking at it from a place of healing or restoring a community back together, first there has to be an acknowledgement that there was a wrong. If there's been
And
an acknowledgement that there was a wrong, then we can probably go to plan step B, to where are you willing to sit in space so that we can dialogue about this? And the circle format actually allows for everybody to be on the same playing field. So it's not a situation when you're putting a student, adult, a parent, anybody in a hierarchical situation. We're sitting in community together. And it's so powerful when we can sit in space together and guess what? Take ownership of a part that I played. You can take ownership of a part you played. And now let's work on solutions together to bring harmony back to the community, whether it's a school community, family community. So that's the way I look at it when it's done right.
wow. So in your restorative practices, you might have a teacher who has, based on what the student says,
Right.
harmed the child. Right. And how comfortable or how open were most educators to taking part in that?
I will be very transparent and say probably 50-50. But what happens is when I had a teacher willing to engage, case in point, I had a restorative circle with a Caucasian teacher and an African American student, senior 18. During the course of the circle, teacher agreed to the circle. She wanted to sit in space with this particular student. But then it's powerful in these circles when you have these aha moments. During the course of the circle, this teacher stops and says, wait a minute, I was in a power struggle with you because I wanted to exert my power over you, not even recognizing that you are a grown man. Student says, but I wasn't going to let you embarrass me, so I challenged you as the adult. I can't make these moments up, but I mean that was just a powerful moment for an adult African American male and his Caucasian teacher to go, wait a minute, we were at odds because you weren't going to embarrass me as the teacher, you were going to embarrass me as a student. Now, what do we do now? And what they both chose to do was say they presented in front of the class and really had a great dialogue with the class on, as a teacher, I was wrong for exerting my power and it made the student feel demeaned. And the student in turn shared with the class, should not have handled the way I did. And I mean, it restored it back to right because each classroom is its own community.
Yeah.
Now I may can't fix every community, right? But that was their aha. And you can't make those moments up. So that is one example that I always learn from, because even for me as the facilitator, I sat there like, wow, how can you data that? How can you quantify that? You can't, other than
I
a
don't think you
student
can.
leaving going, I don't know what you do, Miss Kelly, but I want to do that when I get older.
Oh, isn't that the ultimate compliment
Right.
to have, a former student when you see them 10 plus years down the road? It's like,
Right.
you were one of mine, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I've had that experience a couple of times, and it's just, I don't have a word for the way it makes me feel when I see
No.
that. It's just, it's empowering. It's encouraging.
Right.
I think it makes us continue to do the work that we're doing. Okay.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about the Teachers of Color Alliance that you have. I know that I have talked to systems literally from coast to coast who are struggling trying to find teachers of color so that their teaching demographic does try to or start to reflect their student demographic. And they all say they have so much trouble trying to find teachers of color. One thing I always do suggest is create your own pipeline, grow your own. But that's, I think, easier said than done. So really excited about what you've done there. And I'm sure there's going to be some districts listening that want to know what you did. So tell us about it.
And I love it. Not did, we're doing. So
Doing.
I love the project, and I don't want to just say like it's a one and done project, because it's not. My hope is that we are building something that's sustainable and replicable. That is always the hope of anything that we do in education. But the Fresno, and I credit actually the Fresno County for doing this, having this brainstorm of saying, why haven't we looked at our students in the classroom and simply encouraging them to be teachers? Like, I mean, it seems minute, but it was huge. And so what we've been able to do with this particular project is look at a elementary school, a middle school, a high school, a community college, and a CSU. Literally. And how are
Okay,
we
so a CSU, for folks not in California, is a
Yeah,
California State University.
thank
Just
you.
want to make sure. No problem.
So it's our 4-year university here. And so what has happened, and I'll be honest with you, we have our struggles, because currently the schools that I support, one of them still doesn't have any African American teachers. So we are looking to partner with our teaching credential programs to say, okay, where are they at, right? But the biggest thing that I love is that we're looking at our students as early as 3rd grade and creating systems for them to look at teaching as a profession. Because what I've learned is, if you ask a 3rd grader, a 1st grader, a 2nd grader what they want to be, you and I know, Dr. Berry, they're going to say a firefighter, a policeman, Spider-Man, but they're going to say
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah.
Why does that change if we ask those same students in 6th, 7th, 8th grade? What happens in our system that they no longer want to be a teacher? I mean, and they're very vocal about it.
Yeah, I think if we all think about it, in fact, I just recorded an episode last week before, I don't remember. Things start to blur. But I talked about my high school calculus teacher, trigonometry teacher, Mr. Nadeau. And it was what absolutely turned me off to mathematics, right? So we have those teachers, or this is terrible because I can call their names. But this was so long ago and they were already old. They probably are no longer with us. Mrs. Bjorkland in middle school, who it's like she hated me and wanted to torture me. And then there are those great teachers, right? So the ones that we think about, we want to model ourselves after. And I always acknowledge my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Gowdy, because she really shaped a lot of my life and my academic journey. But if our kids get jaded against teaching, it's our fault, right? It's the examples of teachers that they have. And I should, teachers versus educators.
Right.
Their teachers will jade them. Their educators give them a love for learning. 2 different things.
I think it was at the same conference, and I don't know. I go to quite a few conferences, but it was at one conference I went to and I sat in a session, and it was African American male, and they were asking him why he didn't want to go into education, and his words were, you could have heard a pin drop. He said, "Why are we asking people to return to the scene of the crime?" And
wow.
I literally, it shook me. And this literally happened a couple of months ago. And from his lens as an African American male in a system that we continue to perpetuate these same practices that are not supporting our Black and our brown children, that was the response. And I ponder on that often. Even as I'm working to build out this pipeline, like, what does it look like to really support our students, so that they're not seeing it or feeling the repercussions from a teacher who, and to be honest with you, probably shouldn't be teaching, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
it scares me because there is such a shortage of teachers coast to coast.
mhm,
I don't know that there's a day that goes by where I don't see something in the news about something a teacher is doing or has done and gotten caught, right? Because that's the only
right,
way we hear about it. How many more don't get caught?
right,
Yesterday, it was a teacher who was had rearranged the furniture and was forcing kids to fight in the classroom to the point that they were bloodied. And it was one student who recorded it and was able to report it that caused it to stop. But it's like, how could we even begin to repair
right,
the children that were in that classroom
right,
to trust us? And like, that one young man said, I love it. I think I might change the title of the episode. Why would we ask them to come
right,
back to the scene of a crime where they received
right,
so much harm?
right. Um, and I agree with you. I'm not even saying I have an answer. I mean, because if you look at the numbers, it's an accurate statement. If you look
Yeah,
at the suspensions, if you look at the misbehaviors, if you look at the expulsions, even here in Fresno, it's as young as first grade, kindergarten, getting expelled from school.
that doesn't make any sense.
We're constantly sending the message, you're not welcomed here.
Yeah,
So I I work daily working to hoping to change that narrative and hoping to be in space with students that feel the value. One of the high schools that I support with this pipeline, the principal, the BSU students did some data. They really did some data on how they truly felt at his school, anonymous data. And so it was given to me, and I asked the students, did they mind if I shared with their principal? Didn't have their names on it. And so I shared this data with the principal. And I mean, he, in his mind, he was doing everything right. Students felt welcome. But at what point do we have to listen to what those students are saying? Well, because of this, he engaged in back to restorative, right? He and his leadership team sat in a restorative circle with those BSU students where they were allowed to and felt safe enough, right? Because
yeah,
you just can't put students in space where they don't feel safe.
yeah.
To share that second, we've had two, the second circle we had, the students actually did a PowerPoint and presented to us. And I mean, it was powerful. For instance, one of the they not only stated the problem, they stated solutions. For instance, don't just judge my face. I'm not always angry. The solution to that is please pull me aside and ask me if I'm okay that day. Like
Yeah.
so it is not only just giving students a voice, because I hear it all the time. We're giving students a voice. The problem is we're sending students back into environments that don't accept that voice. So there, it has to be a two-phased approach in which we're trying to do, Dr. Berry, with this pipeline is we're not only looking at phase two of empowering students, phase one is transforming educators.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that, I mean, even if you have a fantastic pipeline, when you look at the educators and teachers that are in the system right now, if their mindsets aren't shifted to
Right.
welcome and accept and validate and value and affirm children of color, the reception that might come to those teachers of color who do come into that system is, I'll say, cool. Um, and that's part of the reason why we don't have to, or we can't just work on a pipeline to build teachers,
No,
to recruit teachers. We have to do the work to retain them once they're there.
absolutely.
And that,
Absolutely.
yeah, and that's where the whole, when we start talking about what is equity and inclusion,
Right.
really, that's a piece of it. It's not just about the students in the classroom having equitable education. It's about the equitable treatment and inclusive treatment
Right.
of the people who come in to serve them, who are there to serve them, not the ones, I always talk about, is it equity or is it charity, right? Are you coming
I love
here
that.
because you have this charity mindset or white saviorism where you're coming to save these poor black and brown children in
Hmm.
the school? Or are you there because you really and truly believe and value them, and you want them to have the greatest
Right.
opportunities? Those are the people that we need. And yes, we need more of them of color because our children need to see people that look like them so that they can believe that they can become. a
Absolutely.
teacher?
I was asked, somebody asked me a question. They said, how do you feel working to build a pipeline currently at a site with no Black teachers? I said, great. And I'll tell you why. Until I feel safe enough to ensure that my Black teacher is not going to be a target there, right? Like we have to create these environments that we're not, like you said, just not having Black teachers to say we have Black teachers.
Right.
What environment are they in? How am I was challenged by one of our professors, Dr. Henderson here at Fresno State. He said, who's protecting the psychosocial needs of these Black teachers once you get them in? So
None.
right. And so I love it because I love, even with this work, I've been able to reach out across the aisle and talk to people to say, hey, because we can do something fast just to say we're doing it. But if we're really in this for the long haul and build it and do something right, I'm okay with building brick by brick and taking it slow. That doesn't mean our kids can wait. That means we need to do some learning with adults. We need to have some different conversations. I talk to my principals about, I don't evaluate, but they do. So how are you evaluating? Are you looking at the standards through the lens of equity? What does it mean to have creating and supporting a maintaining learning environment for all students? Does it really mean all students? Like, I have these conversations with one-on-one with my principals, and they're open to these conversations. By the way, their data reflects that we need to have these conversations.
Yeah, I don't, and I hear when white people that I've worked with in equity sessions have grown, are open, are transforming, are really and truly doing the work and going on that journey, they will say, I didn't realize how white my space was. I didn't realize how much of everything I viewed through a white lens, and not respecting the culture of others because I thought
Right.
mine was normal, right? Every message that is sent in this country that we live in, for the most part, is a
Right.
very white European centric
Right.
norm. And too often that even impacts our children because the messages they're receiving is saying that they are not okay, that they are
Right.
not normal because they have brown skin.
Right.
Um, uh, I just it frustrates me sometimes, but I know that means I have more work to do.
Right.
And you talked about the sort of the psychological, socio emotional health of the adults of Black and Brown teachers who go into the system. And I do know, I can, I'll say honestly, I can't imagine what it would be like to be a new teacher right now. I mean, when I was a new teacher, I was in California, so it was a little bit different than many parts of the country and other parts of the world where we're a little less culturally sensitive. Maybe California's an interesting place if you've never been there. Um, and I was welcomed and affirmed at not the very first site I taught at, but the second site that I was in, where I felt good. I felt included. I was part of the community there. People, my peers in the department did listen to me. And although I ultimately left because leadership did not have the same value system, I was okay in my little niche. But I think about how politicized education has become in the last 6, 7 years now,
Right.
and how much more difficult it must be to be a teacher in the first place, but to be a teacher of color in a very white space, even that much more difficult. When you can, somebody might be angry that I say this, but you can go out and become a customer service agent and make more money than you can as a beginning teacher
Right.
staying in an office answering the phone. So,
Right.
there's that. If we're not looking out for teachers' emotional health,
Right.
um, we can't expect them to stay involved and stay engaged.
No. I hear all the time that people don't leave job, they leave leaders, right? Um,
No, they leave managers. Leaders, they'll stay
right.
with. Managers, they'll
Absolutely.
break. Yeah.
And so that is another area of concern because we just don't have enough. And if I'm talking education administrators, principals, vice principals, superintendents, all these higher level positions of people of color. So that is another area of that can be discussed as well. But if we're looking at um, a first year teacher, you're absolutely correct. I couldn't imagine right now in the space that we have it now. Like you said, California, I have been blessed in education, whether it was a paraeducator, whether it's when I was teaching a little bit, whether it's a counselor. Because as we find our group, we know how to do that. That's like, if you
We
ain't
will
gonna let
hunt
us
each
create
other
it,
down. Yeah.
yeah. If you ain't gonna let us create an infinity space, we're gonna create our own. Like but then even that becomes targeted sometimes. Like, okay, why do you guys have to group? So all of these nuances of education. So I would hope, though, through not just this pipeline, through the work in education, that we're looking at how are we truly supporting the mental health needs of our teachers, first year or veteran. And we need to have some honest conversations about some teachers that either need to grow or go. Like, I don't think we're being honest enough in education when it comes to certain things. And if you're not enjoying the profession and you're not in it for the right reason, then it's okay. Exit left. We're good. And we don't take it personal, because what we are noticing, it's those teachers who are doing more harm to our students, and by the way, all students, but particularly our Black students.
Yeah. Let's talk about representation. There's a lot of research that says representation matters. I've read that research. I firmly believe that in that research. I think about my K-12 journey, and I think I wrote on this at one point in time. I did not have a teacher who was Black until sixth grade. I had Mrs. Brown. I did not have, the only teacher of color I had in middle school was my science teacher, Mrs. Lopez. She was Latina. And then in high school, the only teacher of color I had was Mr. Huey, my geometry teacher. That was it. And that was in a very culturally diverse area. Still, I only had 3. 87% of our teachers are white women, something like that, especially down the elementary. It might be a little bit different at the high school, but I remember that 87%. But more than 60% of our children are children of color. We are really upside down in that. And so from what I've read, I know that when children of color don't see someone who looks like them, that there's a lot that they're missing out on. And when the research also says that when teachers of color are present for white students, that white students tend to do better as well. So that whole rising tide lifts all boats. Right. I know that you and I probably have a similar experience in that if a Black teacher saw us cutting up, they were going to correct us, right? The bar was, and it didn't have to be a teacher of record. I just know if there was a Black teacher on campus and they saw me doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, like cutting class. Yeah, I did do that in high school. Yeah, I was bored. But they would speak to me like family, right? Taking on that role of community elder, so to speak. And I respected that. I don't know that we have that same type of respect from children now because so much has changed. But I do know that we tend to hold our children a little bit more accountable when we're there.
I think it comes back to motive and heart, because I will tell you this, I'm 47, I'll be 48 next month.
You have to tell.
But I will tell you, and mom of 4. So if I didn't tell you that, I'm a mom of 4. I have adult children, and I have a 13-year-old. He'll be 14, so we call him the boy. The reason I point this out is that I'm the mom auntie, right? Just who we are in community. So you bring up community. Yeah. I still walk on campuses no matter where I'm at, and if I see that little kid cutting up, I'm cutting my eye, right? Because we do that. It's instinct. And it's funny because kids still respond. So I'm a huge believer that motive, they know I'm not coming from a bad place or bad intention, that I'm actually looking out for you. You need to quit cutting up. I've had conversations with students to say, you know what, I get that they don't, because you also know we got to teach our kids to code switch, right? Um, so all of these elements go into what you just said of that respect for elder or community that we have. It also brings us back to even that restorative of how we interact as a community. The problem is we don't know, and we don't have enough people who understand the community.
I That makes me think of something I said. I run into someone at a conference, that a board member, that I hadn't seen for, it was COVID, that COVID gap, a black man, and we were talking somewhat along the same lines. And I said, we've lost our village, right? While very much many of us, especially those of us who are a little bit older, still remember that, that sense of community is not as strong as it used to be. My gut would say that having more African American teachers, having more Black teachers for our Black children, having more Latina teachers for our brown children, and Indigenous teachers for our Indigenous children, that will help to rebuild that sense of community for them in that space that for so long has been overwhelmingly white for them.
Could could you imagine if our students attended a school where they felt that level of village?
I
I
can, and I'll tell you why and where, because
oh gosh,
I
I just got
I
chills.
sit no, I sit on the board of a small charter school here in Houston, and I was just over at the campus a little bit earlier today, and it always just, maybe that's why I'm extra happy today. They sort of restore something in me. It is predominantly Black. I think we are like 99% Black, has been since 1962. It was a private school before a charter school, high performing. But, I walked on the campus today, and they were in the hall, and they were a little chatty. I mean, they were in the hall. It was passing period, but they quieted down. And I said, good morning. And they all answered back, good morning. And every child I saw, I'd say, good morning. I didn't even have to say, how are you? They would, good morning, good
Oh my
morning. It just, that sense of community is there. And they just light up, when adults speak to them, but they're in a culture that is very much that village that we talk about. So I know it's possible for us to build that. It is still there. It's just not there enough.
I'm also going to highlight that the students said good morning and you didn't reply back. Oh, they're so well spoken, right? Yeah.
Girl, don't get me started.
Yeah.
Don't.
So that alone, things like that is we, oh my God, yeah, that we can go
Yeah.
there. So and I'm glad you highlighted that charter school because I recently did a learning at a charter school here, 73% African American. I know they still um, have some teacher diversity issues, but when I tell you, I know exactly what you're talking about when you walk on that campus, and I felt home. And it's it's I had personally, it was like I remember, and this just happened last week, and I remember leaving going, man, that was good. Like that felt good.
Yeah.
The learning guides African American. Like I said, they still have some teacher diversity issues, and I don't want to call them issues, but they can have more Black teachers. That's
Challenges.
just my stance.
Yeah.
But the population of students and the excitement and the noise and it sounded like Disneyland to me.
Yeah.
I
It's good noise.
It
It's
was
good
great
learning noise.
noise.
Yeah.
And it was engaging. So I agree with you. I'm glad you are able to equate that space with the village being built back because I am so optimistic, Dr. Berry, that we can rebuild this village. It's going to be intentional though.
Yeah.
It has to be intentional. When I first started doing the TCAEE project, the Teachers of Color Alliance, um, I was very intentional saying it's a Black teacher pipeline. It's a Black teacher pipeline. Uh, I think language mattered. I think I had to present it, or I've learned to present it along with some colleagues here to say we just have to call it what it is.
Yeah.
Um, that does I get questioned all the time. Well, what about this group or what about that group? And my response back to your data is, do you not know if it works for the least or the most marginalized that it will support everybody? Like it's a win-win. Do you not understand? We're like setting everybody up to win.
Yeah.
But when you can't get out of that sheltered lens, you don't see it as that. You want to be defensive, and
Yeah.
you feel attacked, like, okay, this is some type of reverse racism. No, it's not. And these are things I've actually been told. That's why I can
Yeah.
highlight that. And I'm like, but yet we have the data year after year, year after year. But when we try to do something about the data, then it's a problem. So what I've learned is there's no way to win sometimes other than just focusing on doing good work.
Yeah. Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. And so we have to demand that change and cooperation and
Right.
collaboration so that we can get to that point and get over the language. Why is it so harmful? Look, you've got 87% of the teachers are like what's wrong with reducing that just a little bit to
Right.
get to a place of balance,
Right.
right? And parity with the demographic of the students.
And I will tell you this, I have amazing colleagues in this work, who don't look like me, who are sharing the same message, saying, we're not saying we need to get rid of white teachers. We're saying we need more black teachers. Like, and so I will tell you, it is nice not to have me always say it and to have them say it, right? Like, go ahead, go. I'm just amening them on, but
Well, we know that allies, when we talk about
yeah,
allies, they are, particularly white allies. There
right,
are people who are willing to put their own personal selves on the
right,
line in order to support that cause.
absolutely,
That's an ally. And when I work with white people and talk about allyship, I talk about the fact that they can say things to white people that we cannot, and they'll be heard and
Abs-
respected. Where we can say the exact same thing, but they're going
right,
to diss me and accept it from you.
right.
So I'm glad you have those people. And I would guess that, if I had give me 5 tips that other systems should do, that would be one, to find those white allies to help support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not only that, one of them is a white man. I'm not a man. He can say some things in his district that I can't
Yeah.
say. It's and he can and when I tell you, he would probably drop every f bomb, and he says it. If I did that, I'm the angry black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am aware that doesn't take away from my role as a program coordinator. I don't feel less than me. I'm aware of the barriers and the gains that we can get when you understand true allyship,
Yeah.
and we're in it together.
Does Fresno, or is your office partnering with other organizations, whether it's a district or another LEA that might want to take a look at what you're doing and start their own?
Absolutely. We've been asked by a couple of other districts. Right now, the partnership is with Central. I know our biggest school district here in under Fresno County is Fresno Unified, and I believe they're doing some amazing pipeline work within the administrative realm. Um, so what my hope is, though, is I've learned through doing this work, Dr. Berry, because at first you feel like an island, and then you learn, okay, wait a minute, there's some work going on in Bakersfield, there's some work going on, in all these different areas. So the hope, and I know that we're talking about, is how do we align practices and then build something that we talk about best practices. So Bakersfield right now will be graduating their first cohort of 7 out of their Black teacher pipeline with the residency model. So my students matriculate through Central Unified, and we've used Avid. We've brought Avid down. Usually that's middle school here in Fresno. We've brought it down to an elementary because of the strategies that they teach, right? And although
Okay.
Avid advancement via individual determination has been presented as it's for those kids, no, it's for my kids. So, so we've really been intentional about our students using Avid and elementary, middle, and then they enter into that careers and education pathway while they're in high school, earning that dual enrollment credit, hopefully graduating with a high school diploma and their AA. That's the long game. The reason I highlight that is because the work right now being done with Bakersfield, and we've been in collaboration, is he's doing the high school and beyond project, that once I get to that point, it's already built. And I have a colleague here who does the rural teacher residency. And as you know, in the Central Valley, we have a lot of rural areas that are often forgotten. And she does the residency there. So once I get my students to that point, the model is already set for them. So it's just a matter of connecting those dots.
That is awesome. And we're going to make sure that listeners have your contact information in the show notes so that if they have a question, hopefully you won't get 500 emails.
Absolutely.
But boy, if you did get 500 emails, wouldn't that be wonderful? Because that means, yes, that there are a lot of people that want to get this
That would
done.
be
So I have
great.
one last question for you, and it's one that I ask of all of my guests. I sign off with a paraphrase of Angela Davis, Dr. Angela Davis, who said, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." So what is the thing that you cannot accept? And then what can listeners do to support that change?
I cannot accept that we don't have an answer. I keep talking about conferences. They're going to say, why do you keep going to conferences? You don't gain nothing from it. Yes, I do. I gain a lot. But I'm also understanding that we go to conferences and they present the same data. The data hasn't changed. At some point in time, I can't accept that we don't have an answer. Let's just do something. And guess what? Even if it doesn't work, we can't say we didn't try. But going to conference after conference and just hearing, well, this is the data and these are the groups and they're marked and all these different things, I cannot accept that with the group of educators that we have in the United States, the education system that we have, the work that you're doing in your area, and I'm doing my work in my area, and we can't come up with something to support our students to change these numbers. So, I mean, and I say that not to be bold and not to be bold, right? Because not arrogant, I mean, but to be bold. And so in doing that, I'm understanding if it's literacy skills, free to adopt a Freedom Schools curriculum here in Fresno, right? And so because if it works for a kid that looks like me, it works for all kids.
Yeah.
But yet we want our children to read better. But you have something that works, but we don't want to use it. Why? Let's unpack that. Yeah. So that would be my thing that I cannot accept it because I think we have more answers than we're really to lean into.
Awesome. Just a reminder, folks, if you are hearing this for the first time on an audio podcast, all these episodes are coming to you first via live stream on my YouTube channel. So if you are not subscribed to that YouTube channel, check down in the show notes for that link, subscribe, turn on notifications, and of course, share, spread the word. Don't keep it to yourself. My guest today has been Leslie Kelly of the Fresno County Superintendent's Office in Fresno, California. We're going to put her contact information down below as well. Leslie, thank you for joining me and sharing your insights. As always, it is wonderful talking with you.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. I know you're signing off, but I will tell you this. I am so glad we didn't like that session at that conference.
Absolutely. And to you equity warriors out there, if you or someone you know is an everyday equity warrior doing amazing things, let me know. YouTube chat right here. DM me on LinkedIn. Leave me a voicemail at 3epodcast.com. Send up a smoke signal. We will continue to bring you awesome and inspiring guests. And I just think that maybe there's someone listening who knows someone who should be a guest, and maybe that someone is you. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and as always, don't worry about the things you cannot change. Change the things you can no longer accept. And I'll see you next time.